Okay, this is our industry growth panel, and while most of these people do not need an introduction, we're going to make them introduce themselves anyway. So first up, it's Robert Clark.
Robert Clark. I grew up in a small town. No, actually, I grew up in a military family. My father was a Navy fighter pilot, and so grew up in a family that was very focused on technology and high work ethic and that kind of thing. But I started my racing career when I was 9 years old in karts and worked up through motorcycles and small Formula cars all the way up to Formula 5000 and amateur racing. But somewhere there, got multiple degrees. I have an education in architecture, art, industrial design, mechanical engineering, civil and electrical engineering. And anyway, ended up after getting all these degrees, I went into teaching for a while, and then decided I needed to get into a professional career, and ended up at Honda for nearly 30 years. So I started on the motorcycle side of the company, which was my first love. Ended up actually in charge of facilities at one point because of my degree in architecture, and then back into R&D, and then ultimately I was the founder of Honda Performance Development. So, which is probably my real claim to fame. I ground up operation, no facility, no people, no organization, nothing, and grew that company into what I would define as a world-class racing operation facility with R&D capability of engine R&D, chassis R&D, the complete operation. After that, I became CEO of DeFerrin Motorsports and ran Jill's ALMS program. And when we ran out of sponsorship on that program, I ended up out on the street and started my own consulting business and pursued a kind of my vision of the future of motorsport, which is called EarthPre, and also some interest in motorsports-based STEM education. Since then, I've become president and CEO of SCCA Pro Racing, and also hold the role of vice president of new business development for the SCCA. I do a bit of consulting work for Honda, and I still pursue this vision and dream of EarthPre. So, thank you very much.
Next up, Andrew Craig.
Thank you, and good afternoon. You can probably tell from my accent that I was born in southern Indiana. And actually, I have two businesses, one in sports politics, which is not of interest today, but the other one in motorsport. I'm the former chairman of IndyCar, and I have a motorsport consulting business where primarily I work for the FIA World Endurance Championship. I'm their representative in North America. So we have actually a very successful and growing race at Circuit of the Americas in Austin. And I also do some work in Formula One. I negotiated the Grand Prix to be held in Azerbaijan, in the city of Baku, capital of Azerbaijan, starting in 2016. And having negotiated the contract, I've now been hired to represent them in their relationship with the FIA. With the FIA and, of course, with FOM, who are the rights holder. So that's what I do in motorsport, and I look forward to being a part of this panel.
And next up is Lynn St. James, and a lot of people might not know Lynn. They know a lot about you, but I wonder how many people realize that you were once studying to become a piano teacher?
13 years of lessons and 6 weeks of teaching, and you find out. It's good to find out what you're not good at. Yes, anyway, I am Lynn St. James, and I found my passion in 1974 when I went to the first road race I ever saw, which was the 24 Hours of Daytona, and stayed up all night and outside of Turn 1 and just thought, my God, I can't believe this is fabulous. Then figured out how could I do this, and found out about this club called the Sports Car Club of America and became a member in 1974, and And then my first race car was a Ford Pinto, which was the first year that they had showroom stock, and I've never looked back since. So I'm just totally passionate about the sport. I've been fortunate enough and blessed to work hard to be able to race for Ford Motor Company for over a decade, and probably that's one of the things I'm most proud of, to have 1-year contract relationship with an automotive manufacturer for 14 years. And went on to then obviously race. Most people recognize the fact that I raced at the Indy 500, which was a dream come true beyond belief. Was able to win Rookie of the Year and actually keep showing up. Was able to be in 7 Indy 500s and 15 IndyCar races. So I believe, I'm still actually very much pursuing my passion, because I still race vintage cars, because I found out old race car drivers get to drive old race cars, and that is really cool. So my life is still goes on, but I, at the same time, really believe in reaching back and trying to help others. And after I did Indy, was amazed at how many letters I got, and they didn't want just autographs. And so since then, I've been really trying to work with driver development before people knew what driver development meant, because they'd say, what does that mean? But want to continue to be able to help others be able to find this sport and find their passion and help the sport grow. Thank you.
And I talked with Carrie about being able to spot good drivers. You have that ability as well, and also so supportive of the young ladies that went through your program, many of which I've gotten to see race and enjoyed watching race as well.
Thank you. And I have to mention, a lot of guys came through our program too, just so people know, okay? Thank you, Dennis, though. Thank you.
And backed by popular demand from SEMA, John Warniak.
Yeah, but I'm subbing in, right, for Jim Campbell, for my good friend Jim at GM. And but anyway, thank you very much. Glad to be here. John Warniak, and grew up in the Motor City. Very privileged to have grown up in downtown Detroit, and out of bankruptcy today. Anyone knows that? It's pretty darn good. I mean, largest bankruptcy in the world, so lots of good things going to happen there. But I grew up in motocross racing, not 4-wheel, but 2-wheel, and ended up in the aerospace, 10 years in the NSA when we designed the B-2 stealth bomber. And then when Hughes was purchased by General Motors, I got to lead a team of about 100 engineers, systems engineers like myself, to General Motors, and a lot of the tech transfer, but more importantly, the process of product development. And Herb Fischel, who's in the audience, used to say that radar was my nickname, thanks to Herb. And it was, yes, all the product, all the technology that came from aerospace and aircraft into the automobile industry at the time, thanks to Herb. But he said the process was worth 20 horsepower at any track. And I always remember that, Herb, because it's how you think about the technology. Technology's great, it's the content, but when you put it in context, that's the most important way to get the value out of the technology. So certainly privileged to be here. My current role is Vice President at SEMA, a small little group of folks that get together every year in November in Las Vegas. And it's basically 14 miles of everything you don't need, right? But everything you want. And I get a chance to be in Detroit with the automotive manufacturers and a lot of the technology transfer that's still occurring between, in this case, the original equipment market and the aftermarket. So it's a lot of fun. So, thank you, Dennis.
In this panel here, it made a lot of sense to have John on, because we talked about this out at a SEMA panel that you were hosting. And when you asked me about industry growth and about, what can we do to build this business, I didn't even think about the fans. I thought about entry-level racing. And that's very important to these folks selling parts and pieces here at PRI and also out at SEMA.
Yep.
So I'm going to toss the question first to Lynn. I go out of order every once in a while. What can we do to get more people excited about entry-level racing, especially the younger demographic?
Well, actually, I don't know who was it earlier made the comment about the car people and the non-car people. And essentially, I feel that this sport continues to always, our core audience are car people. That's why we're all here. That's why most of the fans over the years have gone to races. And the industry, the motorsports industry, continues to rely on those automotive manufacturers because it's the cars that we race. But people care about people. And I really think that that we need to do a better job, that's the whole industry overall, to be able to market the people in the sport, to let people know about those personalities, let them be themselves. And the more diverse those people are, the more it's going to then attract attention. And I mean, young people need to be able to, see that young people, I mean, a Carl Larson or whatever, when you see the youngest driver winning a race and all of that. So I think even though when I was at Indy and still hold the record, I think, for being the oldest driver in the history of the Indianapolis, the oldest rookie in the history of the Indianapolis 500. And I remember trying to pay the PR guy to quit putting my age next to the name because we don't want to attract older people necessarily. But when we do have that, the youngest driver to win, and I think that really starts to resonate with young people. I've been concerned in the industry that I've been, in the industry publications and all that, and what I read is that we're growing a population of kids that are waiting longer to get their driver's license because our basic culture was we grew up and couldn't wait to get our driver's license. We grew up in a car culture, and if kids aren't really that way now, then how are we going to be able to track them if we're only talking about our cars? So I want to quote, because I just read this in Automotive News, and it's basically from the drifting series, but it says here, the auto industry is afraid that young people are losing interest in cars. The response from this very successful tuner out of Southern California is, yeah, I see that, but I also see something more promising. Younger kids, and I mean kids like 10 and 12 years old, they're really into cars. I'm seeing it all the time when I go to car clubs. It might be a limited edition Lamborghini, and there will be 5 or 6 kids who rush over and start taking pictures of their iPads and iPhones. At the vintage races, I've seen some kids run up there, and they were so excited because they saw a Lotus, and they're taking pictures of just the decal, the actual logo on the car. And so I just think that we have to be careful and not believe that if any industry needs to grow, you got to start with your core industry first and make sure that you're going to keep that and maintain it. But you got to look what's missing, and I think what's missing is that we're not focusing enough on the people, and those people will draw attention to other people. So that's not to give up, because when we were having this call, I know Andrew's on his position about if you're in the World Endurance Championship, then it's obviously the cars. And if you look at the Tudor Championship, I mean, there's a whole car market out there that we want to be able to keep. But to be able to grow, I think we have to pay more attention to the people and really allow them be themselves, and that will attract also some of the younger kids as well.
I noticed you said entry level, not next generation.
Yeah.
Quite a difference there.
Well, yeah, and the whole bit being you're never too old to start racing. Mm-hmm.
I proved that, right?
But no, that's the key, is entry level, because I do think if you get more people involved in the sport, then everybody played basketball, everybody played football as a kid, or at least throwing the ball around. Not everybody has had that opportunity to get into a car, but of course they can by going over to Skip Barber. But that's a whole nother story. But the whole thing being, I think you're right. It's entry level doesn't need to be just the younger demographic, although we do want to attract them at
Absolutely.
the same time.
I think, as Lynn pointed out with the video, each generation decides what's going to be cool. And racing has gone up and down, et cetera. But I think, from Paul Newman and basically to Peter Fonda to Travis Pastrana, each generation decides how the car will fit into that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And arguably, some of the younger kids today, a 4G is more important than a V8 because that gives them the freedom.
Yeah.
And they want to know someone with a cool car, and they may know someone as an enthusiast, and that's their go-to person. But still, they want to make the car part of their life, but still that computer and that phone comes first.
Very good point. Andrew, I thought your accent was from Jersey, not from South Indiana. Are we seeing the same things over on the other side of the big pond, over in Europe, as we're seeing here in the U.S.? How does this compare when it comes to talk about industry growth here and there?
Sure. I mean, I think from a point of view of entry level to the sport, the two key factors here are accessibility and cost. Motor racing is extremely hard to access. It's not something which you play at school. It's not something which you can naturally pick up. So you've got to find out how to access the sport, and then you've got to afford it. I think in Europe, it's a broadly similar situation with one significant difference in that sport is much closer because the countries are so much smaller. So when I look at the States, for example, if you want to be a young race car driver in this country, your costs are really high because you've got to travel a long way. If I was living in London as a young racer, I can probably drive at 5, 6 racetracks that are no more than 50 to 100 miles from my home. So there's a huge difference from a cost point of view, and indeed that then means that American drivers tend to participate less in racing because they can't afford to do the number of races. But without question in Europe, and I think here as well over time, karting is the entry level for motorsport. It's relatively cheap. You don't need a lot of people to help you run the car. You can run it with your family, basically. Karting is absolutely the future. And if you look at Formula One, look at every single person on the podium this year, they started out in karting.
Yeah, very good point. Robert, when we were talking a few weeks ago, one of the things that I found remarkable was the stat that you told us all about road race licenses are down 40%, but there's a growth in autocross and rallycross. Why do you think that's happening?
I think it's a direct reflection of the style of the way a younger generation wants to compete. You know, obviously it addresses the cost issue that Andrew was bringing up, is that to compete in a solo or autocross event is much less expensive than it is in road racing. I think the format is more attractive to a younger generation, where you're running multiple runs during the day, it's an interesting. I had my first exposure to a national solo event just this year. I had never been to one before, and I really enjoyed the dynamic because it was something that actually I experienced back in the late 60s and early 70s when I was competing in the SCCA and road racing, is this family social aspect, which Lynn brought up, which is the fundamental component of what racing is all about. And more than anything else, it's a social activity. And if we lose that, which we have, I believe, at the upper levels of the sport, you lose everything. So here in this solo event, it has all the elements or right ingredients of having a social platform, an inexpensive means to go have competitive sport, and it's fun. And it's quick.
Yeah.
You get an instant kind of result, unfortunately, in my case, when I was competing, and you get to compare yourself against your peers. So it's an interesting format. Lisa and I went to the Pomona Drags recently out in California, a very similar kind of dynamic, where you've got races that are very short, obviously, drag racing, and you see fans move from the grandstands to the paddock to the midway section, you know, so they go watch their favorite drivers or their favorite classic cars. Then they move over to the paddock area because they all tear down their engines, you know, between runs, so they get to see that part of it. And in between, they're at the midway, so there's this constant movement of people and activity. And I think it's those things that are interesting a younger generation that appear to have a shorter attention span and an interest of experiencing more.
And those autocrosses are fun for everybody to watch or participate in, except for the cones. They don't do so well.
Well, an interesting part of it is, you know, that in addition to our aging demographic that's affecting all of our sport, is that another component of the autocrossing is that when you're not running, you're working. And that's another problem, is that the SCCA, if you didn't know it or not, supports most of the races in the U.S. And so that's a problem, is that our working force is aging as well. So here's an opportunity to train workers that ultimately can help replenish that need.
While I'm still learning how to do the Twitter thing, and I'm kind of low tech, is technology, and before I throw this question out, I'm going to ask, are there any questions for our panel that anyone has? Okay, I'll be getting the microphone around to a few people here. But in the meantime, since I am even moving slower now after lunch, is technology the key to getting that younger demographic? And this is one of these toss-up questions that anyone can jump in. And is it things like iRacing and these simulator-type games? Is that going to be what really attracts that younger demographic?
Yes.
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 Unanimous.
And why?
Because of the connectivity.
Okay.
You're connecting to the lifestyle.
And does that train the same skills, Lynn, that a driver needs on the track?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think so at first, but now I mean, really, I've watched, I think Nissan has their academy, and then somebody that had never driven in a race car, but had done all of that Nissan Academy game stuff, and it turned out, and I think raced at Le Mans, and successfully. And then recently, Mazda just announced their recipients of their scholarship, and one of them was nothing more than somebody that had never had any on-track, actual physical car on-track experience. So obviously it is, and it's working. I mean, it's changing. We have to accept it, but it's changing.
And you've got like new companies like NVIDIA. If you've heard of NVIDIA, came out of the gaming industry. They are the best. It's a graphic processing unit, not a CPU, in the Tesla. It's in the Cadillac. It's in the Audi, the autonomous Audi vehicle. And it's in the Super Cruiser Cadillac. I mean, think about that. It's the same gaming as it is now for humans, for that processing going on board the vehicle.
You know, the key is we need to engage with this younger generation the way they want to engage, not the way we think they need to engage, but the way that they desire, and that's through virtual means, it's through designing and sketching cars, it's through simulators, it's through experiences that they enjoy and can easily activate. And we should be talking at the pre-K level, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. You can't make anybody like something. You can't insist they like it. You've got to go out and win their hearts and minds. It's got to be relevant to them. It's got to be meaningful. Just to add to what Lynn said, Nissan are joining the World Endurance Championship next year. And at their press conference at our race in last September, Circuit of the Americas, they announced that it's their intention that one of their drivers in 2017, not in 2016, in 2016, not in 15, will actually come from the Academy program, so that they're looking to take somebody from being an electronic race car driver to being in the car immediately at the highest levels in the sport, which is pretty impressive.
And that's a good point. People talk about sustaining or staying relevant in motorsports. Well, there's no such thing as staying relevant, because you have to become relevant to the next generation or the entry level. And that's a whole different prescription, because it's a next generation. They'll define, as you said, I think, engaging them at their level, Bob. I mean, that's exactly it.
Question, panel. And Mr. Craig mentioned motorsports politics. Have you had any word, or can you update us on the development of the accelerated depreciation rulings at the federal for track improvements and expansions that NASCAR's been pushing and I'm looking forward to?
Actually, I can't. I don't have any knowledge of that at all.
Okay, while I get the next, who else had I know there was one over there. I'm coming to you next. Okay, I'm going to ask a loaded question, and if all of you want to plead the fifth, that's fine. As far as, we've talked mainly about industry growth from the participant side. From the fan side, are we seeing some racing series that are trying to go overboard and making this too much entertainment and not much about the racing? I'm kind of looking at the NASCAR model and saying, all I have to do, just like an NBA game, I only have to tune in for the last 60 seconds. Now I only have to tune in for the last 50 laps of a NASCAR race.
5.
Have we jumped have we jumped the shark a little too much on the entertainment side?
I would say the balance of performance should not mean balance of results. Everybody doesn't get a chance to win. Everybody has the chance at the starting grid to win, but that doesn't mean if you win, you get put into a smaller box, as Herb talked about earlier. You cannot keep making that box so small that no one wants to compete. The fans want to see good racing. And I think that box has to be big enough, but if you start penalizing the people that are doing better because of their technology or their skills or whatever they have, that's wrong. Balance of performance and adjustment of performance should not mean everybody gets a chance to win.
Yeah, I think that racing always needs to be something which is hard to do. If you're going to appeal to people and get their attention, there has to be a factor in racing that is, wow, how do they do that? How does someone go off and win the 24-hour race at Le Mans, for example? How do they do that? And if you take that away by frankly, in regulations, having a cookie-cutter series where everybody's the same, or balance of performance issues, I think you're taking away the fundamental essence of this sport. And this sport is about the best people winning and being people who are doing something which is truly remarkable.
I think it varies depending upon the level that you're competing. You know, if you're at amateur level, you know, cost and technology, those things have to be at a certain level that allows those to enter at a very low level. But if we're talking about the pinnacle level of the sport, then I think the value has to be equal for everyone to have a proper business model. It has to be good for the fans, it has to be good for the participants, it has to be good for the manufacturers and suppliers and sponsors involved. As we said on our teleconference, racing needs a reason to exist. And right now, it's not fulfilling that need. It's not providing the value to all of those constituents at a level that makes it work. It's not working. And the sport, it's easy to see. You look at the key indicators of TV viewership, attendance at the races, the number of entrants in the sport, they're all in decline, and we can't deny it. It's across the board. We're seeing it at amateur level as well. So it has to provide that value.
I just want to add, as much time as I spend in the sport and love it, I spend a lot of time with people that are not in the sports, that are mostly from other sports. And I just would put a word of caution out there that we have to be careful that if we have to spend more time explaining to a fan what's going on, instead of them just being able to watch it and enjoy it. And sometimes racing is it's just too freaking complicated. I mean, when I'm trying to explain, you know, I spend most of the time if I'm watching a race with somebody who's not necessarily a race fan, but they want to understand it. They want to understand what I'm really doing and why I'm so, you know, excited about this. And I spend most of the time trying to explain to them what's going on instead of them just being able to understand who's leading, you know, and all of that. So I just think that's a word of caution. You know, there's always going to be complexities and there's always the technology, but just
So
to be
explain the
careful.
chase to me.
I still don't understand. But I did like when they finally graphically showed, you know. Yeah.
I'd just like to
Yeah,
make
go
one
ahead.
comment on something Robert said. Robert rightly said that TV ratings are in decline. And that's certainly something which everybody should be concerned about. But the reality is today that the people are watching more television at any time in history. They're watching more TV. TV is not in decline. What's happened is TV's become grossly fragmented. Audiences are getting smaller and smaller because the consumer has massive choice. Now that sounds really bad news, but actually there's good news in this. What it does mean is the people who are watching you really want to be there. They're there because they love racing and they want to watch racing. So the old days when you quote a ratings number, it might be very large or whatever. The truth is the set was just on. People weren't watching. But today when you have an audience, it's real. They are watching and they're committed.
TJ Halsman, Pro Cup Karting in Atlanta, Georgia. I do have a confession. I didn't get my driver's license until I was 18, but the reason was I was racing the whole time, so why drive on the real road? I run a kids karting program in Atlanta. We graduate about 130 8 to 12-year-olds each year, but the problem is we lose them once they've graduated. How do we keep them involved in motorsports, or how, as a promoter, help them get that next step and stay involved?
Do you know why they're there?
A lot of them, they watch NASCAR or they watch drifting and they want to get experience doing that. Generally, it's the cost that seemed to scare them when they look at that next step.
Well, that's a reality because we all know the cost of the sport, even at the end, you know, grassroots, that is going to be an eliminator. But I think one of the fears I've had with the younger drivers that I've worked with through driver development is because we're starting so young. You mentioned 8 to 12-year-olds, is that they burn out sometimes. I mean, they just, you know, and they're like, okay, what's next? I mean, they're kind of into the cycle where I guess, so I just have a concern sometimes that they burn out and we've invested in them and we want desperately to have them, but, you know, they're going to move on and the ones that are going to love it are going to stay with it. So maybe accept some reality, but.
What is the cool factor for karting to their peer group? And I ask that as kind of rhetorically because if you look at motocross, supercross youth, 8 to 12 is getting up there in age. They're already established by then. Loretta Lynn's here in Franklin, Tennessee, has 26,000 people, kids, competing for those 1,200 spots every August across the nation at that same age group, at the amateur level. So there's a cool factor. Maybe it's Red Bull, maybe it's Monster, Rockstar, I don't know. But maybe therein lies part of why do the kids leave karting to something else?
Well, I think part of the problem with this particular example is that given the age of the kids involved here, the next step up needs to be local. They're not going to start traveling nationally. So you've got to find something which works for them at a local level that's nearby.
We would welcome in junior karting and solo racing, and there they could race at a national level. I mean, we have 14-year-olds who are competing in pro Formula 1600. So the step is not so significant. But I think solo racing would be a natural that would take them into the next level.
One of the things that I've seen in the 25 years, and this comes back to the youth to, graduating into other sport and staying with the sport, is my question is, as we talk about, the electronics and everything else, it seems that one of the things that's harder and harder to achieve working with younger drivers of any age, just starting from zero and working up, is the commitment in time and energy to the craft. And I don't think we found that bridge. It seems like people, the attention spans are shorter, and the craft of racing at any level requires a commitment and a level of energy that lifestyle has made it very hard for. And I think we're all struggling to find a solution around that. But I just never seem to find an answer as to what direction to push that.
I would push it in the direction of a global, particularly the Red Bull, global rallycross. Shorter heats, a lot more understandable, as Lynn was saying, a last chance qualifier, and in an hour and a half, the day is done. That ADD mentality, they want to see conflict, they want to see resolution, conflict resolution, not 8,000 left turns.
Change the sport.
Exactly. Well, it turns them off. And again, you got to get to their level of understanding. But again, that, global rallycross growing out of the X Games. The action sports connection to Red Bull Global Rallycross is fantastic. I mean, you talk about growth in eyeballs. You mentioned TV being the biggest broadcast, but the narrowcast on YouTube. Go to Jim Connor. Look at what Ken does. Ken Block. I mean, my gosh, look at his car control. Can he win a race sometimes? Probably too many concussions, but but he is ADD, and the kids, that's my hero.
Very cool.
And everybody who watches on YouTube is there because they want to be there.
Exactly.
That's the
Good
point.
point.
And so you may not have quantity, but you've got quality.
Right.
And very frankly, many sponsors still will talk about, well, your TV ratings are down or whatever and so forth. Yeah, that's true. But the quality of the audience has improved a lot. And I think, frankly, as an industry, not just in motorsport, but in general in sponsorship, we have to do a better job of explaining to sponsors, or at least pushing back on sponsors when they tell you your TV ratings down. Yeah, we know that, but let's look at the level of engagement, because engagement is higher.
One of the best parts about being moderator of this sort of a panel is I get to break my own rules. So instead of having a closing statement, I'm going to actually feed you guys each specifically something that I wanted to bring out in this presentation. Robert, tell us a little bit about ClarkWorks.
Well, ClarkWorks is a motorsports consulting company, but the key project that I have working on is Earth Pre, and Earth Pre is my vision of what motorsport needs to be at the pinnacle level, and that's giving it this reason to exist. It has a number of key components. In order to entice manufacturer involvement, it basically has no rules. Basically, what I did is I went back and looked at the dawn of the automobile, the dawn of automotive competition, and in those early days, there really was no rules. And so in this format, there's like a safety cell that is regulated, but beyond that, there is no regulation. So you can run whatever engine type that you want, whatever fuel combination you want, whatever suspension you want. It could have 6 wheels, it could have 3, whatever you want. It's totally open for innovation. And the idea there is that if I go to a car show like the Detroit Auto Show, and I go to around all the major manufacturers, each has many, or not each, but many have concept cars, which are visions of the future. Their vision of styling, their vision of technology, and kind of a driving a stake in the ground of what they believe is in the future. EarthPre is about running concept cars. So now not only do you have a static concept car, but you have a car that you can actually demonstrate your technologies and prove them to the world. The event, like originally going back using the Indy 500 as an example, completing 500-mile race in 1919 was a huge accomplishment. Today, it's nothing. So EarthPre is about a change of the event itself so that the event becomes a challenge and it evolves over time. As the product evolves, the technologies evolve, the challenge would evolve as well. So the cars have to compete in a multiple series of events to prove that their technologies are viable to real world conditions. Whether it be maybe they have to do a slalom race, maybe they have to do a drag race, maybe they have to do a long distance economy run, and ultimately it culminates in a road race where they're competing at very high speeds in a very typical traditional format. But maybe you throw in some mix there, where you wet the track occasionally during the mix of the race, and things like that to mix it up, to add interest to the event, and again, to prove this world viability of the technology. For the fans, it's about providing a whole new level of information that they currently are not receiving. Information about strategy that's in the race, information about what's going on with the car itself, how much fuel is in the car, when are they going to have to make their next pit stop, communication with the crew and the driver, multiple camera positions within each car, so that today kids want information. They want their information quick. They want it in the format and way that they want it. EarthPre will provide that information to them. EarthPre is also an expo. It's about demonstrating new technologies, alternative energy solutions, energy conservation, which is key importance to us, not just in the automobile, but across the board. One thing of key importance here is that there is not a product in our lives that's more important than the automobile. Yes, kids are appreciating differently than we did in our generation, but the fact is that there's not a product in our lives that's more important. It's about a sense of style, it's fashion, it's about our personal brand and identity. It's a reflection of our responsibility about investment. It's typically our second largest investment that we make. If you include all the infrastructure that supports the auto industry, including all the supply system, parts, road systems, restaurants, hotels, all that, it's clearly the largest industry in the world. And it's not going to change for a long, long time. So the power of the automobile and the industry that supports it is huge. And it's up to us to learn how to present it to this younger generation in a way that they appreciate and welcome into themselves and activate around it.
Andrew, give us the Reader's Digest version of what you're doing over at hookit.com.
Boy, hookit.com is actually originally was called Sponsor House, and the whole idea was to hook up grassroots athletes with potential sponsors. We have evolved somewhat over the years, and the primary purpose now of Hookit is actually to provide opportunities to brands to link directly with athletes who in turn spend an awful lot of money buying their stuff. Hookit has been around now for 5 or 6 years. We survived the Great Recession, sorry. We survived that, amazingly enough, and the company's profitable. But I'd just like to comment, if I could, a little bit on something which Robert said. When Robert was describing a different way of thinking about what a race car is, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that's the future. And in a very similar way, in the FIA World Endurance Championship, we no longer say to manufacturers, we're no longer prescriptive. We don't tell them how many cylinders it must have. We don't tell them the engine must be a certain size. What we do is we say, you get a certain amount of energy, and that energy can be derived from gasoline or from diesel. And by the way, that energy will not be enough to finish the race, whether it be the 24 hours of Le Mans or our other races, which are all of 6 hours duration. And therefore, you have to find other ways in terms of energy recovery systems to have enough energy to complete the race. You can have up to 3 recovery systems. So this results in, if I look at our 3 leading LMP1, that's Le Mans Prototype 1 competitors right now, Porsche's solution is a 4-cylinder, 2-liter turbocharged engine with 3 energy recovery systems on the car, on the brakes, on the flywheel, and on the turbocharger. Audi are using a V6 diesel engine with 1 engine recovery system, an energy recovery system, and Toyota are using a gasoline-powered engine V8 with I think it's 3 or 2 recovery systems. So we're taking a totally different approach, and the manufacturers love this. When you think about it, you don't set out to design a road car by telling somebody how many cylinders it should have. You design it on a basis of fit for purpose. So what we're doing is very similar. It's very interesting what you said, Robert, because it's very, very similar. And I do think this is a part of the future of motorsports. The days when Robert and I were in IndyCar, when it was a 2.6-liter 4-valve turbocharged engine with incredibly low PSI, as I recall, they're gone, or they should be gone. They should be gone. And very frankly, even though I'm involved in Formula One, I think their rules are far too prescriptive, far too prescriptive. They need to allow the manufacturers far greater freedom. If you want to keep manufacturers involved, you've got to give them something that's relevant to their future. And just to finish on this, to put this into context, at the Le Mans 24-hour race this year, with no reduction in speeds and no reduction in distance travels, it's the first year of these new regulations, the leading teams use 30% less fuel. And that matters. That matters. Thank you.
Lynn, you are an amazing motivational speaker, so I'm going to give you the big opportunity to give us that rally cry, give us that inspiration of what we can all do to help in this realm of industry growth. You got 30 seconds.
Okay, continue doing what we love, but figure out how to do it differently, and don't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, I think what we've heard here before this session, the technology parts of it, what Herb and some of the others had said, we have to be able to keep our passion in our core, but we have to be able to quit thinking that will only, that's the only way it's going to work. And so I think we just have to expand our thoughts, our horizons, and our people. If we just keep attracting the same people to these trade shows and to the industry, I just believe that there's so much more out there. I mean, technology-wise, people-wise, I still think it comes down to, human resources are so much the key, as opposed to just technology for the sake of technology. I hope we don't have it where you don't need drivers anymore, though. Please don't go to that point.
Google's on its way to that.
There you go. And John, I'm going to give you guys, or you, the final word.
Well, this is a panel on growth, right? So
yeah,
so something about growth might be appropriate. So I think, technology is disruptive by design. And basically growth is about disrupting underserved markets, not disrupting overserved markets. So in your businesses, where is that client, where is that demo and psychographic not being served? And develop a solution to solve that problem. Then you will have a market. So instead of trying to disrupt an existing market, let's take NASCAR, IndyCar, SCCA, and the others, but find out where those segments aren't being served and maybe align with them to serve markets within some of those. And a point about disruptive technology, it doesn't totally eliminate existing technologies. We still have print, even though there's digital out there. We still have railroads, even the car replaced that. But what disruptive technology does is eliminate companies. You don't want to be one of those companies that get eliminated because you didn't stay relevant or become relevant to that next generation. In this case, growing the industry of racing.
Let's hear it for our industry growth path.